Thanks for actually giving me the opportunity to engage you this afternoon in respect to some topical issues as it pertains to Nigeria as a country. And in fact, we are going to engage a lot of present issues today, actually, but I want to appreciate you for giving me the privilege as a young person. So to start with, I think I must come to actually talk about a few things about you that I've come to respect and at the same time learn from. While I was trying to read some things about you this morning online, I got to discover that you've actually been, you featured in a lot of great places, in fact, at a very young age. This is what young people like us are not even, accessible to in this generation. At some point, I discovered that you were once a member of a presidential advisory committee at the age of 27, and at some point too, you actually participated, you contested for the presidency of this country twice. And, sir, I'd just like to ask some of those questions because I have not gotten to understand how you were able to go that far at a very young age. Because it's, for a 27-year-old person to have actually attained the height of at least two master's degree and PhD at the age of 26, it is extraordinary, and I must come to actually appreciate and reckon that. So, but I'd like to know how you actually, went that long at that age, sir.
I think it's a matter of the culture of the times. Things have changed a little, unfortunately, but there's still a lot of young Nigerians who are doing more than that at that age. The irony of two master's degrees and a PhD at 26 that I actually did not want to go to university. I went to Loyola College in Ibadan back in the 60s, and just as some of us were reaching the school set age or class, what was most popular was to be an airline pilot. I had a very good friend that grew up in the same neighborhood, a gentleman called Olumide Lawal, and we called him Olupi amongst ourselves. And Olu's mother was rich merchant, textile merchant. So immediately after Olumide finished school set, didn't even wait for school set result to come. He left to the US to go to flying school. Because generally American flying schools treat flying almost like learning to drive a car. So all the certification, school cert, this, that, did not seem to be an issue. So he didn't wait for his school cert result. He took off to go to flying school. And 10 months later, he was back in Nigeria as a certified commercial pilot and was hired by Nigeria Airways. And, he was happening big time. I don't know, Olupi probably wasn't more than 19, 18 at the time, And so he and I used to drive around Surulere in his car, just being a nuisance as kids, taunting people with the fancy car he drove, So it was such fun that I couldn't think of anything else but to be a pilot. So I said to my father, flying school or nothing. And anyhow, cut a long story short, my father had a very nice negotiation with me that, okay, look, you're so young, you've done school cert, you're 15 years old, why don't you just mature a little, go to university for 1 or 2 years, make friends, mature a little, then you can go to flying school and join your friend Lumide. So I thought, okay, good idea, why not? So in a very funny thing, I just, okay, so what? I'm just going to university for 2 years to enjoy myself. What will I even study? So I'll close my eye, I'll put down the pencil, whatever course in mind, I will fill that in. That's how I decided what I was going to study in the university, because it was just for me fun to find 2 years. So we were having fun for 2 years. And then I go off to flying school. But as they say, God has His own plans in these things. I took, in those days, there were 5, then 6 universities in the country. And competition to get into them was very stiff. So you took the entrance exam, none of these no man of today, took the entrance exam, and you just waited. One day they will publish the result in newspaper. And parents will call each other, your son, you passed into Ibadan, stuff like that. So, to my own surprise even, I passed to go to UNN. And a very close friend of mine and classmate of mine, Gbenga Shadipe, had entered UNN already to study engineering. So I thought, okay, I'm going to join Gbenga in Nsukka. So I went up to Nsukka and readied myself for 2 years of ecstatic undergraduate life, and then out and off. But I was affected very much by some exposure in primary school. My father used to work for British Petroleum, and he was transferred a lot.
So yours must be a kind of rich family.
Not really. My father was average middle class.
Most of us, multinational companies, as a matter of fact, must have grounded people who are extremely rich.
I was not poor. We're not poor, but we're not rich. We're just like being a civil servant in those days, or being middle class. I wouldn't even say upper middle class or anything. But anyway, my father was transferred around northern Nigeria quite a bit in the 60s. And I went to a Catholic school. All of my primary, secondary education in Catholic schools. I actually started primary school in Kano in 1960. St. Thomas's Primary School. Then I was transferred to Guzo, and I went to another Catholic school, Our Lady of Fatima. At that time, Kennedy was president of the United States. He had just been elected. Was the first Catholic to be elected president of the United States. And these American priests were enormously taken by the Kennedy mystique. And we became the recipients of their passion and excitement and all of that. And so everything that John F. Kennedy said, I had to suck up as a 7, 8-year-old, At age 9, I read books that 30-year-olds had never heard of, because these priests just kept giving me all these books. And every competition, every Sunday, Saturday, Sunday, amongst the altar boys, there would be competition for something. I typically would win, and it would be a book. So I began to get that kind of exposure pretty early. By the time I then ended up at the University of Nigeria, I had a deep culture of service. Service is sacrificial giving of yourself for the good of others. All that Kennedy stuff, Camelot. Ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country, and all of that. That was coming out of my nose, ears, and everywhere. So those were the years immediately after the Civil War. And the University of Nigeria was significantly destroyed by the Civil War. So there was a lot of, need. Buildings had been blown open, university, libraries, all those kinds of problems. Didn't have enough personnel or resources. So my head of department called the students together and said, look, we can't afford a librarian. But people are donating books from all over the world to us as part of the post-war support. So we have all these fantastic books in the library, but we can't afford a librarian. So you students organize yourselves, and I will give you the key of the library. And you can then decide who mans the library, when, and how. But the students were, as usual, very selfish. Didn't want to take responsibility of spending their time on the library. Obviously, all that effect of those Catholic priests in Guzo came through to me, and I just one day thought, what are you guys doing? This is for your own good. Someone like me, I don't even intend to graduate. I I just am here to have fun, and you people can't see that this library is for your own good. Just to shame them, I went to the head of department and volunteered to run the library. So the head of department gave me the key of the library. And so it was that nobody could use the library unless I was there. And a sense of responsibility to allow us to use the library overcame me. And from being one of the serious, as we used to say, the rare boys on campus, who just going around, playing around, knowing that he had no plan to graduate, I found myself in the library all the time because I wanted others to use the library. And since I was there and I was doing nothing, I began to read all those books. Wow. So that shortly after, I found that when I spoke in class, the lecturers were embarrassed because they had not read half of the books I had read. And that's how I did a U-turn from flying school to graduate school. So the day I graduated, because I went into youth corps, the very day I finished youth corps, I was in grad school. This is why at 26, I could manage those degrees. So I don't think it was anything extraordinary, but it just happened.
So in fact, there are a lot of things extraordinary about most of those things because our generation now has been taken away by most of those frivolities in the system currently. So I must come to actually credit this aspect of your story, sir, because it inspires our generation. While you were talking, sir, you actually talked about few things about civil war. You talked about some adverse effects of this particular war on you as a person and your university. A lot of Nigerians are actually feeling that you should be part of a generation of people that are consistently drumming support for Nnamdi Kanu or most of those guys, and that instead of actually, rolling with secessionists clamoring what Igbo people would always seek, you've chosen to pitch your tent with Nigeria as a country and as well support it in its development. I want to know reasons why. If our people believe you are even close to the system, the government in place, most of those governors, president, and all that. So what was the reason behind most of this?
Yeah, I mean, this is very simple logic as far as I'm concerned. First and foremost, the Civil War was most interesting. I was one of those who experienced Civil War from the two sides. I was inside what became Biafra when the war started. But my father was in Lagos. British Petroleum had transferred him to Lagos after the crisis in the north in 1966. But I had started secondary school in Onitsha, Christ the King's College and Catholic school. So I was separated. My father was in Lagos. I was in Biafra, but it was for just a few months because eventually I crossed over to the Nigerian side, and with the help of an army officer who was a friend of my father's, a colonel who was in Asaba, we ended up in Lagos and reunited with my father. And I started schooling in Ibadan, Loyola College, early 1968. So that's how my Civil War ended. I found that interestingly from Ibadan, we didn't even know there was a Civil War going on. I mean, the only thing that image comes back to me every time I see the Boko Haram stuff and how those of us in Lagos go, those funny people are having a problem in far north of Nigeria. That's the way we in Ibadan saw the Civil War in those days. Oh, there's some thing called the Civil War going on somewhere in the east. It's an interesting story about Nigeria. Anyhow, being in Ibadan during the Civil War obviously created a different kind of consciousness. And that thing that you will note from the way my growing up has traveled, that I was born in northern Nigeria. I actually was baptized in Jos. My father was posted to Maiduguri, so I lived in Maiduguri as an infant. He was posted to Kano. I started a school in Kano, and essentially finished primary school in Guzo, and then started secondary school in Onitsha, then left, of course, shortly because of the Civil War, and did the bulk of my secondary education in Ibadan, and lived in Lagos. Now, not many Nigerians have that very pan-Nigerian background. Now, one of the things that kind of thing will do to you is make you recognize that humanity is a shared humanity. There's nothing different from an Igbo man, a Yoruba man, a Hausa man, a Kanuri man. We have a shared humanity. Unfortunately, because we've had very poor leadership, the leaders have not enabled us to see that essence of our reality. In fact, one of the things that I am very active in many ways around is what is called a handshake across the Niger, southwest, southeast engagements. And whenever I see Yorubas and Igbos quarreling, I consider it such a silly thing, because if you really read history, Yorubas and Igbos are cousins. One of the best writings of our global history has evolved. It's an American called Diamond. He's the author of a number of books. One of them is called Gems, Guns, and Steel. The second book is titled Collapse: How Human Societies Have Failed Through History. And Jared Diamond's main thesis in looking, he wasn't even looking at Nigeria or Igbos or anything. He was writing about global, that's how you find that humanity started with the black man in Africa. And those that migrated northwards, the weather affected their gelatin, so they began to look pale. And they became white men. And now in these social movements in Africa, people were going west-east along the coastline of West Africa. And the way that you know people who are related is living the evolution of human beings. They were very first simple. The first things they learned to identify were parts of their body or things around them. They gave as language evolved. So if you look at the Igbos and Yorubas, for example, they still have the same words, more or less, for your nose. Imu is Imi in Igbo. Enu in Yoruba is Onu in Igbo. Iti in Yoruba is Nti in Igbo. Igbo is Ubo in Igbo. So, the very earliest symbols in life are still exactly the same, Igbo and Yoruba, indicating that Igbos and Yorubas were one people. Then some of them then moved further east, and as they became more sophisticated, they created new words. That is what makes the two languages look different. So, one of the benefits of the exposure and the education that I have been privileged to have is a better understanding of human nature, which is why I take a different attitude to these things. I think that we will thrive and prosper more as a bigger nation than as small nations. However, if trying to thrive as a big nation leads some people to think that they can make slaves of others, then you can justify, rationalize breaking down, breaking up.
But what's your perspective about the way Igbos are being treated currently in Nigeria? In fact, the fact is, Yoruba people are actually passionate about seceding from this country at the same time.
That's my point. Just failure of leadership. I mean, people who have led Nigeria have not been smart enough to realize that they are not leading Nigeria properly. Why do we have a melting pot in America? Why is it that you can come from any part of the world and soon nobody even remembers where you came from in America? I was living in America when the boat people from Vietnam began to arrive. One generation later, from dry cleaning and all these kinds, they've all become rich. They've integrated into American society and all of that. I believe in the melting pot concept of society. If you look at how the Greeks saw human beings, they categorized them into three. The basest level of human beings are people who just think of themselves. And they call that group of people idiots. It wasn't an insult, it's just a categorization. Those who think only of themselves were identified as idiots. Some people, therefore, graduate from being idiots, speak the same language or who share bloodlines and stuff like that. And typically those kinds of people see anybody different from them as an enemy. And so they are called tribesmen, tribalists. And then the third level of human development is citizenship, where you see a shared humanity. See in other persons is the humanity that they carry, not the language they speak or stuff like that. So this is essentially how I like to see people.
Wow, wow. Thank you so much, sir. Thanks for the opportunity. Without actually wasting much of your time, sir, I just like you to give your last word, at least a kind of counsel for people who might actually be having access to this interview via print or, via voice, whatever.
Yeah. Well, I think that human progress, comes from how we as human beings see tomorrow more clearly and how we educate ourselves to make for human prosperity. Education is central to how human society prospers. And many times in our country, we don't give the emphasis we give to education. Two things are critical. If there are only two things that government should do, healthcare and education. But we find that the kind of poor leadership we have across the country do not make us focus enough on those two social sector issues. So, my counsel to a lot of young people is educate yourself.
Yes, sir.
It's never been easier in human history to educate yourself than today. Access to the internet, everything you want is there at your fingertip. So educate yourself. Once you're educated well enough, you can change the world.
Thank you so much, sir.
You're welcome.